Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Zero Touch BOM, How to Design with Supply Chain in Mind. Again, my name is Sarah Krieger and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I'd like to address a few logistics and details on the GoToWebinar platform. If you are unable to hear the presenter or see the presentation at any time throughout the webinar, please let us know in the chat and we will do our best to resolve any issues. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please type them in the questions panel as they come up. We will have representatives ready to answer your questions directly during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the EMA resource page. Once this is posted, we will send everyone who is registered for today's webinar an email with a link to the recording in the next couple of days. With that being said, I want to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar and introduce to you our presenter, Ed Clark, Vern Densler, and Jeff Imes. Ed Clark is a business development manager with EMA Design Automation with over 30 years of experience as a design engineer. Vern Densler is a senior project manager from SiliconExpert with over 18 years in the industry. Finally, Jeff Imes has a diverse background based around the ECAD arena for the last 30 years and now focuses on data management, customer service, and a wide range of products addressing the overall solution EMA provides to its customers. Ed will start off the webinar with information on the design pressures, and later we'll hear from Vern on a case study, followed by a brief demonstration from Jeff. Thank you for your attention, and over to you, Ed.
Hi guys, Ed Clark here. One of the things we wanted to start talking about was many of the design pressures that every design engineer will face during his design career. One of them is just the function of the design, making sure that everything works, the performance, and that goes into electrical and functional performance as well. Form factors, making sure everything fits into the package. Like I said, signal quality, power integrity, quality and reliability, design for manufacturing, and cost and getting the design out on time is also very critical. But there's something else that has really been cropping up, and it looks like from the polls, about 33% of folks out there had some issues with the supply chain, component sourcing, life cycle, obsolescence, and so forth and so on. So, with being pulled your regular 9 directions, here's another one that we have to start thinking about now as well. And, how do we go about selecting our parts? There's several different ways that I went about it. It was, go to the vendor website. I mean, 20 years ago, we actually had data books that we would scan through the data books and look at the data sheets. But now we've got distributor websites. And then, of course, design reuse. We'll use parts of our schematic from previous designs that were vetted and known to operate properly. And then once we find those parts, we got to get them into the design itself, where there's a schematic symbol. You're also probably thinking about footprints and 3D models if you're bringing in assemblies and doing check and fit there. So from those different distributor websites, that comes with certain parametrics that are associated with the parts, the values, the manufacturer, part number, data sheet links, maybe even some simulation model for signal integrity or power integrity. But once we've got all those into the design, we create the engineering bill of materials, and that's when the process starts with the supply chain and procurement. We finish the BOM after designing it for 6 months to a year, depends on the type of design work that we're doing. They review the BOM, and of course, as 3% of you said that obsolescence was an issue. So we go back, revise the part again. They review it. Okay, now there's a component shortage, so or maybe there's a long lead time on this, out of stock. Those were all something that you guys had mentioned that it was an issue before as well. So third time's a charm, goes back around, and they approve the bill of materials, and production can start. And that's 2 to 3 weeks of design cycle, time to market, that we can be critical. And basically, how does this happen, and how can we prevent it? With in-design process, in-design analysis, and you'll see as we go forward that the issue isn't always what's in the BOM. It's what's missing from the BOM that comes back around to bite us in component sourcing issues, delays. Compliance is another issue, and that's where we'll turn it over to Vern, and he'll give us some information on part status, life cycle, and such, in some case studies. Vern?
All right, thanks, Ed. So really the minimum ideal data, as we see here, includes part status, which is it active, is it in a last time buy, discontinued, not recommended for new design, any of those things. And then we also have the life cycle risks. So that is typically done as a calculation of similar parts that have been in the market. You use time to market, you use a lot of different factors. At SiliconExpert, we actually have a very nice algorithmic formula that was developed by Dr. Peter Sandborg to calculate that. Counterfeit risk is the risk that your part may have counterfeits out in the open market. So if similar parts have been counterfeit, if that particular manufacturer is a high target for counterfeit, obviously you don't want counterfeit parts within your system. And then really the last thing is the compliance. EU regulations such as REACH and RoHS, and knowing how much lead or any of the other bad things are in your parts so that you can do your roll-ups. And having this data can really assist you in making solid choices to ensure that your components are the best possible solution for your product. So we're going to look at this case study now, and it's based on a situation. Not going to name names or anything like that, but I'm sure that you've probably seen similar situations to this one. So the company was very excited. They got a new contract, and they got to work immediately to start the design. And the designer did what they always do. They went to the parts that they were used to using from the parts list that they had last time. And it's just, hey, I typically use that resistor, so I'm going to use that resistor. I'm going to use that capacitor. I'm going to use that chip. And the design was approved, and the boards were printed. And then after receiving the boards, it was time to start doing the purchasing so that they could start populating the boards. Procurement went out and started buying all the parts, and found out pretty quickly that there was a problem with several of the parts, and they had lead times of 52 weeks or more. And there was little to no stock available at any suppliers. So 2 of the parts had a form, fit, and function alternate, which helped, but there was a couple parts that did not. So their only option at this point, because it's the delivery's due in now, after a month of design and a month of board manufacturing, the delivery is coming quickly, and a 52 week lead time for the parts to populate the boards, not real good. So, are they going to miss their delivery, or are they going to do a quick redesign and scrap the original boards that they've already spent money on, which again, the redesign time could push them past the delivery date as well. So had the designer had access to the latest component data, they would have been able to make better component choices up front and ensure that they were able to meet the delivery. Obviously, they didn't do it on purpose. So we've seen throughout the past few years an increase in demand for certain parts, and that demand can make it almost impossible to obtain some parts. MLCCs were the big one that everybody is having nightmares over. Automotive industry, if you look at what has happened, the systems that were options before are now standard. So the more cars that have these standard now equipment that use all these components, the more components they need to buy, and so that's why they're depleting the marketplace of things like those MLCCs. Mergers and acquisitions, they're another factor. The first thing that happens after merger and acquisition is they look at the product line to determine what they want to discontinue. And then the regulations, because of increased regulations, manufacturers want to be able to sell their product to people everywhere. So like lead-free has started to knock leaded parts out of manufacturing, from the manufacturers of these components. It's going to start happening with other things as well. Again, if I can't sell my product 2/3 of the world because of these regulations, then I've got to do something about it. All right, so we're going to do a little exercise now. And here we are looking at, we have 4 similar part numbers, and just pretend that they'll all work on your board. Which one would you put in your design? So we're going to ask that you write down or remember what the number is, because we're going to pull up the polling screen, and it's going to have your choices of 1 through 4. But go ahead and take a second and think about that, and then decide which of those you would purchase. All right, we can probably put the poll up. Did we get results? There we go. Okay. So just as expected, 41% of the people went with the Murata part. Not surprising, it was the cheapest, right? And that's what we always want to look for. We always want to save money. We always want to have the cheapest product we can get out there so that we can increase our revenue. So let's look at the same thing with a little bit more information. Okay, now what if I were to give you this information that you didn't have before? How would that change your part selection? Again, write down or remember your number, and we'll give you a minute to look, and then we'll go ahead and put the poll up. Okay. Okay, so the majority of people went with the one that was actually not obsolete. So that was our issue with the Murata one first time. It was an obsolete part, but we didn't have that data. So even though the average price when it was in production happened to be cheaper, now that it's obsolete, we can't use it. So we went with the one that was not obsolete and had the shortest lead time. Now, a few of you chose the Chemet Auto one. If you're in the auto industry, I can understand why. If you're not, I might want to think about whether I use that part or not. Again, good thing for it is that it's probably in high demand, so they're going to keep making it for a long time. Bad thing is it may also be in high demand, so you may not be able to actually purchase any of them because the auto industry is going to purchase them before you get a chance to. So we want to ensure the designer has access to the component data when doing the design, preferably within their design tool. We absolutely want to make sure we're scrubbing our BOMs prior to releasing the drawings. As a matter of fact, probably a couple times. Saving money today may cost more in the long run, so we have to look at the component risk and weigh that higher than the cost. So it may be cheap today, but if it's going to go obsolete and you're going to have to do a redesign tomorrow, that redesign is going to cost you time and schedule. So, did you really save any money? And having an approved parts list does help limit poor component choices. You just got to make sure you maintain it. So, make sure that you're keeping it up to date and looking at the current lead times, looking at obsolescence. So that way, if somebody is pulling from an approved parts list, they're doing that based on a good parts list, not a 5-year-old approved parts list. So good design today can save you millions of dollars later. Make sure that your design engineers have access to the data they need within their tool set to make the best choices for today and in the future. Also make sure that everyone is educated on the costs associated with missed deliveries and redesigns. That's a big one. So make sure that they understand that your engineers and teammates and whatever organizational structure you have that's dealing with this stuff, make sure everybody understands a little work up front is going to help you not get into situations like we had in the case study. All right, and back to Ed.
Hey guys, one of the things that Vern so eloquently demonstrated was, well, what if we could provide the necessary sourcing data to the engineer up front? You know, what if we can make this part of the natural design process, you know, and have it done, as Vern suggested, several different times during that process, you know, preliminary design review, critical design review. Use the same data that the supply chain uses for real-time accuracy, you know, as you do your design, not as a throw it over the wall afterthought. So, you know, if we could do that, it would save a ton of money, reduce costly respins due to the BOM rejection, improve productivity for engineering and the supply chain, save weeks of time, and make it easier to manage schedules and deliver a faster time to market. And with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Imes to show you exactly how this would work.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate that. So welcome everyone to the demo portion of today's webinar. My name is Jeff Imes, and what I'm gonna try to do is going to show you how the Orchid user right within their ECAD desktop, they can leverage the SiliconExpert data to have that part and BOM data correct the first time. And I think that is critical, because even if you want to send over a particular design to a purchasing agent, or have a design review, or do something of that fashion, it's very important, because it's going to eliminate those costly respins and that time to market, especially the pains that come along with that. And I've experienced them all too many times. But in a system like that you have with Orchid, and all the capabilities there to be able to integrate to SiliconExpert, it's going to give you that edge. It's going to make it a lot easier to be able to achieve those kind of milestones. Okay, so inside of Orchid, and one thing to keep in mind is that when I'm in here, I don't even have to leave my environment. Okay, so if I want to go through and I want to do a query, I want to see all the parts, and I want to place these parts into a design, keep this in mind, that we give you the visual indicator. We allow you to be able to go in and see parts and track these parts. Understand that if a part, maybe we want to color it red because it's obsolete. Maybe we don't want to get rid of the obsolete part. Maybe we just want to have it available. Maybe we can reuse it. Maybe we see it in another design. The most important part about that is we can see that data in real time as we're designing. Okay. And as we design, one of the important parts is that we can select those components and we can bring those in there into the design. Now, having the part available is one piece of it, but what do you do when you don't have a part? Okay, so when we look at a part and we want to actually create a part, investigate a part, even before we think about talking to the purchasing agent, I can bypass all of that lengthy throw over the wall information and wait, or emails and wait and wait and wait, therefore consuming more time. This is where we can start introducing how we can do that. So in Orchid, we have this capability through our portal to be able to look at distributors. We can also look at the compliance, but let's do it. Let's try this out first. We're going to look at the distributors, and I'm going to look for a part. Now, this part, by the way, this part's going to be the part, but I did change this a little bit of what you saw earlier with what Vern's demonstration was and the polling questions we had. But again, let's just take a look at it. And I changed this suffix on here to a D as opposed to B, and I'll explain that as we go through here. So I'm going to search this. It's going to come up, and it's and by the way, this is real time. So I'm communicating directly with these distributors and getting this information back. Now, with the distributors, I get manufacturer part numbers, the distributor part numbers, also quantity on hand and pricing. Now, again, they are legitimate. That's legitimate information when I'm investigating this part I want to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into that part. And now, immediately what we're going to notice is that now what I can do without doing this, this very tedious copying and pasting and error-prone type of analysis where you go out to the web and go to the vendor data sheet, or even trying to figure out what this part is, I now have the ability to be able to see that data and now bring this into the Orchid environment. Okay, so Orchid's going to, within its environment, it's going to maintain all of these parameters, and it's going to give us that capability. Now, so now that we looked at this, we have attributes that we can copy, and then we also have information that's more sourcing-like. So let's take it a little bit further than that. Say, for example, I want to look at this same part, but let's go into it from a compliance perspective. So I'll select our compliance module that is integrated with SiliconExpert. So in real time, I'm getting that information as I'm inquiring or querying for that part. I'm going to go with this part number. Let's do the same one again. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and search this. It's going to find that part. But here's where it becomes very interesting. This active part is very important because I feel I already know that, yeah, this might be a good part for me to use. It's RoHS, and so I get some preliminary information. Let's go even further than that, okay? So immediately we can see that maybe the RoHS risk, the multi-sourcing risk, inventory risk, and lifecycle risk might be to a certain level that we have there. And then we start getting into a lot of this compliance information that it actually is extremely important for all aspects of industry. It doesn't matter if you're medical, it doesn't matter if you're automotive, it really matters because it's going to give you that information that's going to help you upfront to make that decision. And as we go through, you can see that we capture all the links for what SiliconExpert is providing us. We can also see a historic data sheet and go and select a data sheet that was earlier. I hear so many times how customers, well, I don't want to say previous data sheet. Maybe it's outdated. So this is the way we can even get information. We can go back in time and get this. That is actually very powerful. Even the life cycle, the historic life cycle, we can capture that information also. As we go down through, we can also see chemical data, and this would help if somebody's interested in that certain in the reach and the chemical information based on that component. And if they want to research it further, they can to see if it meets that criteria. And as we proceed on through, we have PCN data. We can get that information, okay? And then also any replacement data. And this is huge too, because I can see that SiliconExpert's doing all the work for me, right? I can see that, hey, this is packaging a reel. Maybe there's something with this part that I might have a better chance in selecting, okay? So it gives us that information. The same thing with cross data. I can see every part that meets a grade that SiliconExpert is recommending. They are the experts in the industry. They understand how this grading occurs, how these cross references work, and I can leverage all of that expertise now to be able to make that kind of decision to select that component. All right, and down here, all the attributes, again, more associated at the part level. But before we proceed, I'm gonna bring this part into the Orchid environment. Right now, I'm just examining that. But let's do a little study on this. So as we go through, let's change it back to what Vern was talking about. Let's put this suffix on it as B. And immediately, what we're going to do is we are going to see that this has a life cycle risk, okay? Now, is the difference maybe it's a bulk part, maybe it's a tape and reel part, maybe there's something like that. But now, I have the visual indicators say, whoa, 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 Jeff, wait a minute. You might not want to select this part because it might be something you want to investigate. So let's go ahead. We're going to go back to this other part here. Don't want to put a part in my system as high life cycle risk. So we'll go back to that part, and we can feel confident because we don't have any high risk at that point. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring this into Orchid. This is actually taking all of that information that I just showed you, and sometimes depending on the web connection and things like that, it might be a different speed here on the response. But the important part is, think about it. I'm not copying and pasting any data as we're doing this. So again, the leverage here is to get that data and get it ready, get all the mapping that's occurring. There's a lot of things happening here, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this as a temporary part. I'm going to leave it as a temporary part. I can release it in the Orchid system depending on what I want to do. But again, let's just leave it as a temporary part, and we'll track it as we do a bill of materials, and that should be able to do it. We can also give it an existing schematic symbol. Now, in the Orchid, whenever we're creating a component inside of Orchid, we can see everything previously used. Very similar to what I just said about copying and pasting errors. Now we can leverage existing data so we don't copy and paste maybe a wrong symbol or a footprint, okay? So again, we'll go ahead and we'll add this in here. So what I'm doing now essentially is I'm creating, and this is a temporary part, and we could track it as a temporary part. And in here, now we've transferred this. This is now my information, okay? I now have it inside of the Orchid arena, okay? I don't have to worry about it at this point of saying, hey, by the way, I don't trust this data. Did I copy and paste it right? Okay, so it's going to take out a lot of this design review and component engineering review. And by the way, one thing about in the Orchid environment, especially in the Orchid desktop, is that even your component engineers can log into the same data that I'm seeing via web browser, and even your purchasing agent. So as Ed was talking about earlier, was making this data available early on. All of the data that I'm showing you today, if you have permissions, can be made available to those individuals that are part of that design cycle, whether it's designing or whether it's purchasing parts, or even going through that whole component engineering aspect. So what I'm going to do is you can see how this information is transferred. This is mine now, okay? So I can now see this data. So if I want to go back through and view the chemical data, I don't even, I now have the same information that we're seeing from SiliconExpert, okay? We track it, okay? So we track that part, and I'll show you in just a minute what we do when we do track it. What I'll go ahead and do is on this schematic page, because I'm going to use this schematic for bill of materials, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to place it. So right within Orchid, I have this part, have it created. I can go ahead and preview the part and go ahead and place it in my design. Okay, maybe we might place 2 of these parts in here. Now we have these parts, they have the information that's transferred, and it's tracked as a temporary part. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it like so. I'm going to leave it part, and because think of it this way: this part is being tracked as a temporary part, and we might have it on a bill of materials as a temporary part. It might not be approved yet. Again, we're starting to get that cycle of information over to those individuals that will help accelerate that whole case study that you saw where you're going to miss deadlines. So this is all going to help enhance that whole process, okay? So let's go back to the schematic page. And what I'm going to do now that I have this part, a couple of things that I want to show you is before I go through and generate a bill of materials, let's go back to our compliance. And now, again, I can search, but the other thing is I can synchronize. So again, no part ever lives forever, right? It's going to have a life cycle. It's going to have its end of life. It's going to have the years available and all that. And the way that we can do that very rapidly, and actually in an effective way of doing this, is to give that user a compliance summary. This is just an overboard snapshot, and let me tell you that this is a very important part of what we do. We can, without even involving anybody else outside of Orchid, I can see what the year's end of life are my parts. I get a snapshot of it. Again, it's not going to be everything of every part detail, but I can get that. Okay, so again, as I go through, I can show exactly how this is happening. Again, you can do inventory risk, multi-sourcing, and if I want to streamline the search and see how many highs I really have, I could do that. So the next thing is that I also have within Orchid, I have the capability to be able to search very robust searches. During the demo, I'm not going to go through and show all of how to construct a search, but it's very easy. But the most important part is I can save these either personally or globally, depending on my permissions. Okay, so it's important because I can actually search for every part that's a high risk part. Okay, that's critical, and then I can really just navigate right to that part that is high risk. I know that if that part becomes high risk, I have a decision to make. I can say, okay, I know it's high risk. I can see it's high risk. I can see that maybe we have a part here. Whoa, this Vichy is red. That means it's red, and it could be high risk at that point. So we give you the capability to be able to configure Orchid how you want to see this data. But the important part is it gives you visibility. Okay, so even back here in that search, what I can do with that is I can also go in and say, hey, for example, I have a multi-sourcing risk. This could cause you major issues. Why do you want single source? I mean, this could cause you those delays that we discussed earlier. Again, this gives you that kind of window of those parts, and I can navigate, make that decision if I want to use those parts. As we go through this process and we look at it, let's talk a little bit now about this bill of materials. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get a bill of materials as accurately as complete as possible. Okay, Orchid's going to give you that, because now what you can do is you can synchronize all the part data, whether it's distributor information or costing, availability, compliance, whatever it is, all that information is inside of this database. And now, whenever I need to generate a bill of materials, I can do that very rapidly. So let's go ahead and do this. So right within Orchid, I can generate these fabulous BOMs, and these BOMs can be leveraged. And here's the nice thing about this: in a collaborative point of view, I don't even have to really go out and even make this avail. The purchasing agent or whoever's doing that design review, and if they have permissions into the database and into Orchid, they can go ahead and they can view the data. They can view the bill of materials just like I'm doing now. Okay, so I can log in, I can get that information. So it's very powerful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a BOM, and we have some BOM sequencers in here. And remember, this BOM could be an engineering BOM, it could be an E-BOM, right? It could be controlled that way. It might be a piece of a BOM that you want to actually leverage later with maybe mechanical information or something like that. But the main thing is we're getting this information rapidly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new BOM. I'm just going to give it some kind of revision here, and then give it a description so we can track it and search for it. By the way, we do a lot of allowing the user to be able to see previously used fields, and when you have to do data entry, it saves a ton of time. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add this. Now, so this is my schematic that I have loaded. Okay, so inside of CIP, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read that BOM. It automatically knows what's opened. Now, if it wasn't opened, I could select it, but again, makes it very easy. Less errors can happen, and I'll go ahead and import this BOM. When I import this BOM, now I have it inside of Orchid as a BOM with its parent and children. And if you want to create leveled BOMs, you can do that. That's not an issue. You can see that I have two parts here. And it might be that it might be delimited, it might be compact, and we can have different views depending on it. But there's my part. If I want to go to it, I can navigate back to it. We have hyperlinks on all those parts. Okay. Next thing I want to do is, since I have this this BOM created, well, what can we do with it, right? So that's the important part, is I can go through and I can copy this, I can save it, I can export it out. So the next thing is I can export it here, or I can do it directly from that view. But the important part is now I have the capability with this BOM to add additional fields of data. So the default, I can even set a default, or maybe I want a purchasing BOM. So I can go through and I can have a purchasing BOM. So this BOM, remember this BOM, nice part about this is if I want to access this, I can directly from a web page and I can see this information. Or if I have the capability, is I can go through and say, for example, I created this SiliconExpert template, and then you can immediately see that how we have manufacturer part numbers, distributor information, life cycle risk, years of end of life. I can basically add any properties that I need to add in here. I can change things. I can move things around based on what my requirements are. And very easily I can say, hey, when I'm done, go ahead and export out to Excel. So I think as you go through and you look at how you can minimize this risk, and I think that's the important part. How do I minimize it? Even eliminate it in a lot of aspects. We can do this very rapidly, which helps with this whole time to market, and all those pains go away. Okay. The other thing, final thing, and that as a portion of the demo is really just want to go through and look at one more thing with the bill of materials. So with the bill of materials, one thing that you can do is that when you look at an item on a bill of materials, since we're storing all the bill of materials, we are storing relationships, and those relationships are part relationships to all those BOMs. So say, for example, when I select a component, and this becomes very handy if a part goes obsolete, for example, what we can do is we can very easily do a where used and navigate to those bill of materials. Okay, so it becomes another mechanism to be able to help you get this process moving very quickly and accurately. I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Ed.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. That was awesome. And just wanted to say thank you for you all attending today. And really seeing what we have to bring the supply chain intelligence into the design phase. As a design engineer for almost 30 years, it would have saved weeks or even months. Those respins, have a cost that are associated with them. Just the improved productivity, the engineering and supply chain standpoints, and then just making it easier to manage schedules and really reduce your time to market.
Okay, so it looks like that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Ed, Jeff, and Vern. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to us individually. I'm going to be closing the webinar now, and we will be sending everyone a recorded version of today's webinar with the slide deck within the next few days. Thank you again for taking the time to join us today.